Hey guys, welcome back. We all know how strong the Flood are in the Halo universe. They laid waste to the ancient humans and foreigners with ease, and came this close to inflicting a similar fate on modern humanity. If it weren't for Chief and Arbiter, we'd all be speaking Gravemind in 500 years' time. Given that they've more than established their dominance on the Halo universe, it's always interesting to see how they'd fare against other types of zombies from other sci-fi universes. Now, we've already compared them to the Necromorphs from Dead Space, which ended up being a pretty one-sided fight. But today, the Flood are going to be going against something quite different. The T-Virus and G-Virus from Resident Evil. Given that Resident Evil 2's remake came out last week and it's like one of the best games that I've ever played, I figured there was no better time than now to pit two of the most iconic zombie types in sci-fi history against each other. So if you do enjoy this video at any point, then leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing if you're new really goes a long way and helps me out a ton. A lot of research went into this video, so I would really appreciate it. Also, though I may use a few clips here and there from the movies, just know that we're only covering the games universe in this video, and not the movie universe. And so, without any further ado, let's get this show on the road. Right, so before I explain the T and G virus, let's just go through a very brief overview of the Flood for those who maybe aren't too familiar with them. The Flood are Halo's primary underlying antagonist. They were created from the corrupt remnants of the Precursors, an ancient god species who created all life in the Halo universe. The basic building block of the Flood is the Flood supercell. It forms the basis of anything Flood, and if it gets in your system, well, you're fucked. They transmit this cell primarily via two methods. It's either inhaled in airborne spores, or it's planted in the host by an infection form. Combat forms have also been known to transmit this cell the way that more stereotypical zombies spread their infection, through biting, but we've only ever seen this happen once, so it's definitely a rarer method of infection. However, there's one catch. For a host to be infected, it must have a working nervous system. The most common creature created through infection is a combat form. Hosts can also be turned into carrier forms, which are walking incubation sacs that help spread infection forms on the battlefield. Alternatively, host biomass can be used to create central intelligences that make the Flood more intelligent and deadly. These range from proto-grave mines to grave mines that can grow so large they engulf entire planets. However, when a host is infected, it's not just their biomass that's repurposed. The Flood gain access to all of their knowledge too, which allows them to use any technology created by a species they infect. Once they've formed the grave mind, they can start creating Flood pure forms, a stronger, more deadly array of Flood forms that don't require a sentient host to be created, allowing their numbers to grow exponentially. And that's essentially all you need to know about the Flood for this video, so let's move on to their contenders. Firstly, the T-Virus. Developed by the Umbrella Corporation in the 60s, the T-Virus, or Tyrant Virus, was created as a replacement for an army. It was built to be hyper-contagious and to hold a 100% mortality rate. However, its deadliness posed a problem. Populations infected would die off faster than they could spread the virus, so to counter this, it was modified. This modified T-Virus now mutated hosts, making them stronger and keeping them alive despite suffering organ failure and brain damage, the latter of which gave them hyper-aggression and obsessive hunger, causing cannibalism, and thus zombification. Although, do keep in mind, T-Virus victims are not dead, nor can the virus resurrect the dead. The virus can be spread in a number of ways. The primary method is through the transfer of bodily fluids from an infected to an uninfected, usually through a bite, though bites can occur that don't infect. It can also be spread en masse via water contamination, which is how the infamous Raccoon City outbreak began, thanks to a spillage in Umbrella's underground laboratory beneath the city. The long and short of how the T-Virus infects a host is that it gets in your system, inserts its genetic coding into a cell, and then hijacks it to spread the virus to neighbouring cells, and so on. Pretty simple. This causes higher brain functions to cease, along with necrosis, which gives the host their sort of undead, zombified look. However, when Umbrella were testing it, they found that roughly 10% of the population had an inherent immunity to its effects, and thus a countermeasure was designed. Using the virus, human eggs were combined with reptilian eggs to create the Hunter, a creature designed to do exactly what its name implies: hunt down the remaining 10%. Certain strains of the T-virus developed by Umbrella used a process called V-Act, which causes the virus in a zombie to reactivate following incapacitation. It was a strain built with V-Act that created the Lickers, fast, deadly creatures with massive claws and a long tongue, capable of inflicting severe damage. The T-virus was also used to create bioorganic weapons, aka BOWs. These again do exactly what they say on the tin. They're creatures created intentionally to become killing machines. The Lickers and Hunters were two of the most common types of BOWs, but others include infected spiders, dogs, monkeys, and basically nothing that you'd want to cross in a dark alley late at night. That said, it was the Epsilon strain of the T-virus that was used to create Umbrella's most terrifying BOWs, the Tyrants. These literal super soldiers are used as near invincible puppets by Umbrella, far stronger, more intelligent, and useful than any other infected. However, with all that said, a vaccine for the T-virus does in fact exist, and it was used by Jill Valentine following her infection. And secondly, the G-virus. The G-virus, or Golgotha virus, was discovered by William Birkin of Umbrella in 1988, and its effects are incredibly different to the T-virus. Instead of causing necrosis that almost kills the host, G instead has incredible regenerative abilities, capable of bringing its host back to life and making them immensely strong. Because of this, it was renamed the God Virus, and Birkin wanted to use it to create a race of biologically augmented G-humans, what he saw as forced human evolution. Sound familiar at all? To aid in his research, Umbrella constructed the infamous lab below Raccoon City, although this would eventually end in disaster. After a few years, Birkin sought to sell the G-virus to the US government and betray Umbrella, so they sent in a task force led by Hunk to stop him, an agent that I sort of like to think of as the Resident Evil universe's version of Emil. Don't ask why. After sustaining severe gunshot wounds, Birkin injected himself with the G-virus, an action that would release its true horror. Over the following hours, he underwent several severe mutations, resulting in a creature that no scientist ever predicted. This was no superhuman, this was something else entirely. As the virus took over his body, his muscle mass rapidly increased, which upped his strength immensely. He grew sharp claws on several of the new arms that he'd sprouted, before eventually mutating into nothing short of a thing of nightmares. When it comes to transmitting the G-virus, there are two possible outcomes. If the victim is similar in genetic makeup to the host, then the infection will have a similar outcome to that of William Birkin. Alternatively, if not, a G-embryo is planted inside the victim, which will eventually burst out and mutate into its own G-form. However, as with the T-virus, there is a vaccine. Codenamed Devil, it was used on William Birkin's daughter to suppress the virus, but not cure it. She even retained some of its regenerative abilities afterwards. Okay, so now you've had a quick rundown on all of the zombie types, let's get to the main attraction, shall we? How would the Flood fare in the Resident Evil universe? Well, I hate to say it for any Resident Evil fans out there, but the Flood would most likely have a field day. The Achilles heel for the T and G virus is that all of their victims still retain their nervous system. That means that all zombies, lickers, G mutants, and even tyrants could be infected, a truly horrifying thought. Granted, most of these creatures would be able to put up a decent fight against a horde of infection forms, but honestly, it's only a matter of time before they're overwhelmed and one slips past their defenses. Another problem is how easy regular zombies could be infected. Not only would this lead to the Flood having huge numbers of combat forms, but at the same time, it gives them a metric shit ton of biomass, which they could use to rapidly progress through their stages of evolution and have a proto-gravemind, or hell, maybe even a regular gravemind constructed in no time at all. That said though, I don't think that the new pure forms that the Flood could create once they had a gravemind would actually be that effective. Tyrants and Lickers in particular would have no problem dealing with Stalker, Ranged, and Tank pure forms. They'd be effective against regular infected, but the immense strength of the Tyrants and the agility and lethality of the Lickers would give them a serious run for their money. At the same time, I'd be willing to bet that a fully mutated G-virus creature would be able to absolutely manhandle a Flood Juggernaut. Juggernauts may be big and they may be strong, but G creatures have the strength to match, as well as having the added bonus of razor-sharp claws. Hell, if a G adult managed to find a proto-grave mind, I'd be willing to bet that it could even destroy that with ease as well. However, that's really where the T and G virus's advantages end. As effective as Lickers, Tyrants, and G creatures would be, given that combat forms are able to use weapons, they'd be far from invincible. I mean, Leon and Claire can quite easily weaken Mr. X with just a pistol, so imagine what hundreds of armed combat forms could do. And I think that there really does speak to the Flood's main overall advantage, their numbers. The T-Virus can't resurrect dead hosts, whereas any creature killed by the Flood can very easily be brought back to life as a combat form as long as the nervous system is intact, but even if it's somehow not, it can still be used as biomass. On the off chance that a Flood form ended up getting infected by the T or the G virus, if that's even possible, which I'm not too sure about, they'd more than likely have consumed the right people's knowledge by that point to know that a vaccine both exists and to know how to use it. That said though, I doubt a couple of combat forms getting infected here and there would really be that much of an issue for the Flood's efforts overall, and so I can say with absolute confidence that the Flood would have no issue whatsoever going up against victims of the T-Virus or the G-Virus. Not that they wouldn't put up a fight at all, but the Flood's overall numbers, intelligence, and ability to infect the dead, the living, and everything in between makes this a pretty one-sided battle. And therefore, the Flood are now officially 2-0 when it comes to invading other zombie universes. And so, that's all for today. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video and that I managed to do this topic justice. I did choose not to include the sub-variants of the T and the G virus, like T Veronica virus and the T Phobos virus, because honestly, the video was gonna end up being way too long and convoluted, and even if I had included those, I genuinely don't think that the outcome would have changed at all. At the end of the day, the Flood are an absolute behemoth of a force. Next time, I'm going to be teaming up with Roanoke Gaming once again to bring you guys another Flood versus video. This time, our friendly neighborhood Parasite are going to be going toe-to-toe with the demons from Doom. Should be a pretty damn good video. So I want to say a massive thank you to Mr. Baby Panda, William Leask, Tactician Lars, and Spartan Johnathan Andrews, and also everybody else over on Patreon for the support. We just exceeded $1,000 over there, which is honestly just mind-blowing. I genuinely cannot thank you guys enough, like honestly, it means the world to me. So thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one.